Welcome, friends, to our Wednesday meditation and talk. This webcast is on my Facebook and YouTube pages and IMCW's as well. We'll begin, as we do each week, with a meditation. We chose this one and hope you enjoy it. You might begin by just checking where you are, what you're doing, and let yourself come into a posture, a position that allows you to be relaxed and awake. And then invite yourself into the present moment. In the stillness, taking some moments to scan through your body and see if there's any part of your body that wants to let go a little right now. Just naturally release, soften, be at ease. We awaken attention through the body with a simple scanning. And you might just start with the top of the head and feel the skull and the scalp. Just feel whatever tingling or vibrating you feel there. Letting the brow be smooth and soften the eyes. Let the eyes be receptive, like balls or orbs floating in a pool of water. It can help to sense a smile spreading through the eyes, lifting the corners, the outer corners. Just sense if there's light or energy or aliveness in the area of the brow as you soften. Letting the jaw be unhinged, the tongue filling the lower jaw, the root of the tongue relaxed. You might sense a slight smile at the mouth. And just feel the sensations and aliveness that fill the area of the mouth. You can visualize and feel a smile at the throat. Feel the breath gently at the throat. Let there be a loosening and a softening there. And then smiling into the heart, sensing a smile spread through the heart area. And that's not to cover over anything, but rather to create a space that you can actually feel what's there. So you visualize and the felt sense of a smile, and just to notice the aliveness, tingling energy in the area of the heart. And sense that energy and openness spreading outward, radiating outward, so that even the shoulders are included, that you can relax the shoulders back and down some. And feel the shoulders from the inside out. You might sense the movement or shift from ice to water, kind of melting on the inside. Ice to water. And then water to gas. Loosening loosely, feeling this space and aliveness and movement energetically. space, aliveness, and movement energetically inside the shoulders. Let the hands rest in a very easy way, effortless. And softening the hands. And again, from the inside out, the felt sense of energy. Sense how awareness is perceiving a tingling or vibrating from the inside out. Again, sensing an openness at the chest. And feeling from within the heart, as if you could be in the interior of your heart. Let that area be filled with awareness. Letting the awareness receive sensation in the heart area. Loosening and softening the belly. Let this next breath be received in a softening belly. This breath. And now this one. And again. Feeling the energy and aliveness deep in the torso. You can visualize and have the felt sense of a smile spreading through the navel area. And that helps to open to the energy that's actually there. You can bring that same visualization and felt sense of a smile and spread through the pelvic region. Let the awareness fill the pelvic region and just receiving the aliveness there. Feeling the pressure and warmth where you're sitting on a cushion or chair. Feeling where the base of the spine really connects with the earth. And just sensing the aliveness and energy right down at the base of the spine. You might imagine and sense the energies of the earth flowing into you. You can imagine and sense the curve of a smile at the base of the spine, opening to that energy. And letting that energy flow up again, filling the pelvic region with awareness and aliveness. Feeling the navel, opening that area, sometimes described as the dantian. It's kind of an energy vortex filling with energy and aliveness. Letting that energy and aliveness flow up and fill the heart, illuminate, bring alive that whole beautiful heart chakra, that energy center that's there. Flowing up to the throat, feeling the brow alive, light, illuminated, right through the top of the head. The whole flow of energy moving up, out like a fountain, and flowing again down the brow, throat, heart, navel. And just centering yourself at the navel, feeling the breath, feeling the aliveness that's there. You're sitting like a mountain, with strength and steadiness and stability, filled with aliveness, open and flowing, fully here, right here. It's from this stable, strong presence right here that you can awaken all the senses. Feeling the full range of bodily aliveness, vibrating, tingling. Perhaps the flicker of light and shadow at the eyelids. Open, receptive to the space around you, the scents or fragrances. Letting the sounds wash through you. If the mind gets distracted, goes off into thoughts of the past or the future, gently come back to the senses, the sounds, relaxing the body again. And feeling the whole realm of bodily sensations as you sit on this earth like a mountain with that power and grace and stability. Aware and open to this changing life. You might ask yourself, am I dreaming right now? Is this a thinking trance, or am I here? And if the mind is drifted, as it quite naturally does, to gently relax back. You might feel the contact points where your body is sitting on the cushion or chair, where your hands touch your legs or each other, feet on the floor, feeling the warmth and pressure of being connected to this earth, the sense of gravity, and the aliveness that lives through this form, this body, this whole dance of sensation. Notice the difference between being here and this aliveness and any thought that might be in the mind movie that's running. And sitting like a mountain, stable, strong, with this open presence that can witness and experience this changing life. The breeze and the light, the changing weather. There's room for everything. As a way of closing, to gently bring the attention to the breath and the heart. So you're breathing and feeling your heart. And as you do, you might again sense a smile at the eyes, a slight smile at the mouth, and smiling into your heart. And sensing for a moment how your heart is experiencing life right now. is this human heart experiencing the different currents of your life right now? And to sense a bit where the vulnerability or tenderness is, fears, the hopes. And to offer some wish or blessing to your own heart. Whatever most resonates in this moment. And if it helps you to just gently put your hand on your heart, so there's a real connecting, a real sense of offering care inwardly. Please explore that. Sensing the awareness and care that you're offering your own heart as really being your true heart space that includes all beings. So we close together, feeling our hearts holding all beings everywhere. May all beings everywhere be filled with loving presence, held in loving presence. May all beings everywhere touch a great and natural peace. May all beings be happy, know the joy of being alive. May all beings everywhere awaken and be free. Namaste. As we end the formal meditation, you might sense the possibility of bringing presence into what comes next, maybe stretching or standing, and then also listening. I'm going to be making some announcements for this coming week. I invite you each round to check tarabrach.com, my website for virtual offerings, and IMCW.org for the live stream offerings made available from our local DC area teachers. And I'd like to let you know this week's affinity groups are women, young adults, Heart With, and the Teens of Color Mindfulness group. And again, each week we thank you for whatever donations you can offer, whether it's $10, some less, and some more to offer support or cover those who can't offer. It does make a difference to us. And so again, much appreciation, and you can check the description for the links. Okay, in a few moments, we'll begin this week's time. It's a conversation with a beloved colleague and friend, Kate Johnson. Namaste, friends, and welcome. We've had our guest, who I'm having a conversation with here tonight, Kate Johnson, here before on this podcast. And I'm like so excited to have Kate back. Now, Kate is a teacher, and I'm just doing my kind of more formal introduction, an author, a facilitator. Key domain is integrating meditation and social justice work, and has had many years working with individuals and organizations. And Kate's a dear friend. You know, Kate and I are close colleagues and friends. We've taught together at meditation retreats and are very involved together leading this teacher training for mindfulness teachers, with a particular emphasis within that on creating like a super robust, leading edge program and training on diversity, equity, inclusivity, and accessibility. So that's like been a big, exciting area we've been working together on. Most immediately, I want you to know about Kate's new book. It's Radical Friendship. Oh my gosh, it's fresh, it's brilliant, it's transformational. Please read it. And we're going to be discussing it, so you'll hear a lot more now over the next little bit of time. So, dear one, welcome, Kate.
Thank you, Tara. It's really nice to be with you today.
I'm glad. I'm so glad we're doing this.
Me too.
So I'm going to start in with like, this is the most traditional question you've probably already gotten on every podcast you've ever done recently. And this is, okay, the book's called Radical Friendship. And there's a lot of radicals out there now, and mea culpa, I know I've contributed. And it's a really strong word. So I want to hear what started you off really wanting to focus on friendship, and how come radical friendship? Was there any like personal experience or event or something that made just the language of friendship important to you?
Yeah, I feel like it was kind of a slow dawning of this is the topic that I really love to focus on for this work, and it did come out of an interest in diversity and inclusion and accessibility, and really looking for ways to support the Sangha that I was in to do social justice work better and with less harm. And what we were finding is that we were attempting to show up for various social justice campaigns. This is in New York City, and that sometimes in those engagements, and sometimes just within our community, that there was a lot of harm happening across differences, and that we didn't really have a framework rooted in the Dharma for how we wanted to be together, how we wanted to be with each other. And so I think, reflecting back on some of my earlier experiences going to a meditation center, and also my early experiences going to, be a part of social justice actions and direct actions and stuff, it was both to learn meditation or to show up for a cause, but it was also because I wanted to be with other people who were kind of like me and cared about the same things. And it was something that I'd never really talked about, or even I think acknowledged to myself out loud, that like part of the reason why I'm here isn't just to learn, what the Buddha taught, but it's to be around people that I think might be kindred spirits. And then I think when I experienced a misunderstanding, or I offended someone, or when one of those relational kind of friction moments happen within Sangha, within people, a group of people who feel like kindred spirits, it can hurt even more, because there's this wish that, if I just find people who have the same values and are studying the same thing, maybe we won't have those relational like knots, it'll be a little more smooth than say the general public. It doesn't seem to be true. So part of what was exciting was finding that within the Buddhist teachings, there were actually so many beautiful teachings about relationship that we could lean into to really build the kind of community that I think we all dreamed of. Yeah. And then I think on a personal note, I mentioned this in the book, I think friendship is something I've always really longed for. It's something that I haven't always found easy. I still don't find easy. I think it's a intimate relationship in which, I find that for me and for many people I talk to, it brings up stuff around many of the topics you teach about so beautifully: belonging and vulnerability and worthiness. And so I really wanted to kind of zoom in and focus on this relationship. And I think when it made the transition from being to describing it as radical friendship, the idea there was that, and the Buddha called it spiritual friendship, kalyanamitta. And I think the invitation there is that we can look at friendship as a spiritual practice, and one that helps us to develop and enrich our inner lives, and also that we can support each other on a common path to liberation. And to do so in these times struck me as a really radical proposition. And the potential of that kind of friendship or that kind of bond to be forged among people in a community, to me felt like this possibility of strengthening communities, strengthening movement spaces in a way that we could really stay together and not only tolerate each other, but love each other long enough to affect real change.
I love the way you put it, that radical friendship is a spiritual practice and a superpower. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I'm right with you on the emphasis on friendship. I mean, many people listening might know that the Pali word metta, one of the descriptions of it is friendliness. And I've always felt like if we threw away all the spiritual paths in the world and all we paid attention to was cultivating that quality of friendliness, everything else would come out of that. It just opens up and wakes up our heart. And right before we started, you and I were talking about what it was like putting out a new book and all the natural insecurities that come with it. And I was wondering if you would share how radical friendship and that friendliness towards yourself is holding a space for that. Like, what's coming up around that for you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, this is my first book. And people keep encouraging me to say first book and not last book, because it was really, it was not easy to write, for the technical parts of writing, and just, learning how to, structure a large text like this, and to have it be varied enough and cohesive enough, and just the right mix of elements that would make it like readable and accessible and beneficial. And then there's also the part of putting something out in the world that other people are going to see, that once it's out, I can't change it. That it's probably going to have things in it that I intend and things in it that I didn't intend but are there anyway. Mm-hmm. And so I was mentioning before we talked, I have been on several podcasts, and there was one day where there was one of the first ones that I recorded was coming out, and at the same time I had several friends text me or email me and just say that they were appreciating the book and they were giving specific feedback, so I knew they actually read the book and weren't just saying that. And then I had this wave of mental cloud roll in and say like, oh, they don't really mean it. They're just saying that. And I could see it, but it didn't make it less painful. And well, I'm not sure that's true. Seeing it both makes it more and less painful in a way, like to become aware of the presence of thoughts like that I think are indicative of, not feeling worthy of praise and self-doubt around, what I had to say and whether it was good enough to share, and that the thoughts themselves are painful. And it's also painful to know that, if you love someone, you don't want them to think badly of themselves. And I feel that way about myself, so there's this sense of, wow, I read this whole book about friendliness, and here I am kind of not able to trust my friends when they tell me something I did was really mattered to them. And I've been working with another round of metta practice again. I thought, okay, well, this is a good time to do some intensive friendliness practice towards myself. And in terms of a radical friendship practice, I think one of the ways that experience has been made less personal for me is to see how those thoughts about what I created not having enough value or not being good enough to be seen by other people, that they're on some level personal, but they're also societal, right? That there's really a way in which the publishing industry, the Buddhist world, society at large has not always felt that people like me deserve a voice and a platform and to be seen and heard. And so allowing myself to be seen and heard brings up, the messages that I think I've received my whole life, despite the best intentions of my, family and friends, teachers who tried to protect me from that conditioning. So there is something about seeing that too. I think that helps to know, like, it's not just a personal failing that I don't have, quote unquote, high self-esteem, or it's not just that my family somehow failed me, but that also there's a structural layer to that that I'm experiencing as personal in this moment.
Wow. So there's two really powerful things here I just heard you say, and I want to break them apart and pursue both of them.
Okay.
So the first one was that when you saw the self-doubt and you really could feel just the pain of it, it's like it hurts to be hurting ourselves with those kind of thoughts. Then the first part of radical friendship is really knowing how to hold yourself in some way, being kind to yourself. And you, in the book, you have really beautiful teachings on how to bring that self-care in. And then the second piece that you named, which feels really important, and this is the one I think we miss, is that those thoughts aren't really our own thoughts. We're thinking society's thoughts, as Kate Johnson once said, that I'm quoting you, I think, which is not, I'm not thinking my thoughts, I'm thinking society's thoughts, which is that sense of not being worthy of being attended to is built into our society as the message that those of color, Black, people of color, Indigenous, it's just thrown in there over and over again that these are not the voices, the intelligence, the messages. This isn't the source of the wisdom and what's guiding our society. So you're stepping forward with something and meeting a kind of a societal attitude. And you do a fantastic job in this book about helping us not take personally things that are really we're conditioned by the larger society. So I kind of want to ask you to speak more about how you see our societal structures shaping and impacting our relationships with ourselves, like the trance of unworthiness, and with each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the internalization of these kind of external messages, both subtle and overt, about, where you belong and the value of our life, and the role we should have in society and the role we should not have in society, often shows up in this kind of, internalized way. We talk about internalized depression, or in the Buddhist world, we talk a lot about the inner critic. There's a amazing artist and performer, Tourmaline, who said, encourages people to work with their inner police, which I think is really powerful for BIPOC folks and for other people who are overly policed in the society. The ways in which there's this voice that says, like, oh, don't do that. You're gonna get hurt. Someone's gonna hurt you if you step out of line. And so there's the knowing of it when it arises, and the naming of it, and the willingness to not necessarily even do battle with it, but to bring up enough quality of love and connection with ourselves, or with another person, or even with the earth itself. But a quality of friendship that can actually help that inner critic or that inner police settle, be less in charge. And when it comes to our relationships with one another, I mean, I think it happens in different ways. I talk a little bit in the book about the characteristics of white supremacy culture, so many of which seem to be expressed relationally in terms of a sense of individualism and the tendency to isolate, and kind of vying for control and power and defensiveness, and that there's a way in which the societal structures that empower and give privilege to white people, but also to other folks with societal privilege, also impact the way that we relate, even among white folks, from what I hear, and certainly even in communities of color. It has been such an amazing movement, I think, over the last several decades to have designated affinity groups for those of us who experience oppression within society in a certain way, to come together and to be in a safer space together. So we have, BIPOC groups that meet, and we have LGBTQIA groups. Women's groups had been operating before that. We started having women's retreats, even earlier. And I think the hope sometimes is that by getting rid of, not getting, but by, having a space that's separate from folks who are, representing or embodying the dominant culture, that we can have, more safety and less of the societal structures of oppression that kind of wear us down on a day-to-day basis. I think what we often find in those groups is that there's some of that, and there's also been some internalization of those power struggles that then start to manifest even within a group, even when dominant culture folks aren't present, And so what's nice about it is that it seems to be easier and more simple to work with in an affinity space. If there's not an us and them, if it's all us, then there's a certain kind of healing that can occur there. So I think, in writing the book, part of my question was like, am I writing this book specifically for people who want to connect across the difference, like for white people and people of color who want to, partner together on something, or, queer folks and straight folks, or like men and women. I think that's part of it, but I also think part of it is like, how are we all unconsciously replicating some of these dynamics in our relationships with ourselves and our partnerships and our families and communities, even though we don't really want to.
I think that's so important because it's pervasive. In other words, the impact of, I think it's a hierarchical society where, and this is through history, many or most societies, and many other animals too, not just humans, create hierarchies where there's superior and inferior. And some hierarchies are absolutely practical and useful, but a lot of them, especially in human hierarchies, end up being oppressive and separating people. And so we don't even have to look at people of overt difference. Most of us can be with anybody else, and there's this immediate comparing that goes on. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're so much prettier, or or you're heavier, or you're lighter, or you're more intelligent, or you're more successful, or you have more this or more that. And we put ourselves up and down in like a flash.
Yeah.
In a flash. So part of it is getting just the toxicity of that, because I made a whole practice for myself around it, that because this understanding that if there's anything but truly feeling our fundamental equality, then love is hindered. Mm-hmm. And then to sense how much more so it happens when there's the real overt differences, where we have real imprinting to automatically say, oh, you're a Black person, you're less if you're a white person saying that. So I'm with you on the need for affinity groups completely, because we have to have some degree of safety to begin to acknowledge and recognize how that all plays out, so that we can begin to not be caught by it. And then we can widen the circles and widen the circles. And so I'm with you. I wanted to share with you and those listening something I heard from Nikki Giovanni, poet, wonderful person, Black woman, says in it, this is an interview that she recorded 40 years ago with James Baldwin, that she's saying
Wow.
this 40 years ago. And it's very cool. And she says about how in her generation, she says, one of the nice things was that they could say, hey, I don't like white people. And then that was the beginning, of course, of being able to like them. And I found that so powerful because it's very hard to admit what conditioning does to us. And yet, when I started thinking about it, it's like, of course there's going to be dislike. How could there not be when there's generations of traumatic violence to the Black body from the white body?
Mm-hmm.
How could there not be distrust,
Right.
a feeling of distrust and fear and anger, given that brutality? And how could it not be that white people wouldn't pick up that, and then on that pick up the anger, the fear, the mistrust, and then themselves feel endangered and angry back? Plus, of course, white people don't want to feel bad about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So since they don't want to feel guilt and shame, they then deny and further separate. Of course, there's all this programmed reactivity. And what if we could not make ourselves personally bad for that? And I feel like this is where I want to turn to you, Kate, because we take it personally. And there's a way that you write that says, wait a minute, this is all the society's institutions are creating these feelings and reactions that are playing out. It's not our fault. And yet it's like, as Nikki says, until we can admit, oh, here's how it's happening, we don't have a chance of going beyond it and really feeling our togetherness. So what helps us not take it so personally, what the society's doing?
Yeah. What helps us not take it so personally? I didn't write about this in the book. I started to, and then this was something that ended up on the editing block. But I think that there's something that is helpful in the Buddhist understanding of the self that is really powerful for this particular kind of practice and learning, that to be able to really contemplate and intimately be in touch with the way that the self is kind of built up over time, and almost like less of a thing and more like a process. And then in the process of becoming a self, that there are, we absorb elements from the environment and they become incorporated in this thing that we think of as me. But they actually didn't start out as me, and they kind of got, kind of consumed or integrated in this way. And of course, not all of those aspects of self or societal messaging, there's like likes and dislikes, and there's, family traits, and there's, it's made up of so much. But to see, I think, the societal conditioning that lends us towards comparison, lends us towards fear, lends us towards separation and the suffering that follows, as something that we picked up. So more I have this rather than I am this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that seems to be helpful to me.
That really resonates, because as you said that, I was thinking, because I spent a number of years in affinity group with white people looking at my own bias and reactivities. And the more I heard everybody saying, yeah, and I feel that too, and other people too, I realized that, okay, so this is the kind of messaging from society. It's the imprint. It's not who we are at essence, just the way you're saying. It got added on to that sense of our own being and solidified there. And so then I wasn't taking as personally the fact that I would feel, I would judge others as less than me on a flash. I didn't take it, I wasn't like, oh, I'm a judgmental, bigoted person. It's more, oh, that kind of judgment and bias is just absolutely the air I've been breathing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that happens too. I mean, I think that's another way where the sense of like personalness gets gets agitated is to be in a group with other people who are all saying, oh gosh, me too. I have that also. So it's not so much this, again, this personal failing, but it's this shared experience. And, one of the things that came up for me, as you were saying that quote from Nikki Giovanni, which I think is so, hilarious and also powerful, is like, when we go into these affinity spaces, it often seems that like white people don't even like white people very much. Like there's this feeling of the more that I've done this kind of work and training with different organizations, the more I hear people say, I don't want to be lumped in. Like that lumping in with other white people seems to be this real pain point. Yeah, I'm just curious about that. Can you?
Yeah,
what's that about?
I think it's part of that. I don't want to feel bad about myself, and I think white people are waking up to the reality of the horror. I think we're waking up to the reality of generations of violating people and considering them less than and other. And so we want to be more woke, and we don't want to be identified with those that are less woke. Mm-hmm. And we're just trying really hard not to feel bad about ourselves. And I know, speaking personally, in addition to being in a affinity group with white people, I was also in a mixed group for 3 years where we were really looking at who are we together. And for the beginning, I was embarrassed to be one of the white people, and I didn't want to be identified as the white people. And I realized how self-conscious I was all the time. I wasn't liking myself or the other white people because of kind of just what we're talking about, is taking personally all the history, and also the fact that it's still in my body mind,
yeah,
the biases and so on. And then and here's what really grabs me, Kate, that it took me a long time to catch, was that the more I was identified as part of a bad group and not wanting to be, the less I was actually feeling any connection or real compassion or empathy or friendliness. And it wasn't until I started not taking it as personally and just saying, okay, this is the conditioning of a society, that I actually could start feeling grief for the real suffering of my friends, and also a real sense of friendliness. And that was a revelation, that I could not get to the place of grieving and loving until I woke up out of the shame and stopped taking it so personally.
Wow. That's huge, actually. And I'm really grateful for you sharing that, because I've been witnessing something in one of the spaces where I'm like responsible for kind of managing affinity groups, and in a process of learning about diversity and equity within the mindfulness teachings. And one of the things that it's been a struggle. Let's just say it's been a struggle, and part of it is that folks who are white don't want to be lumped in with other white folks, and one of the things that I've noticed in that, and people seem to be saying that, which feels really real and valid, is that hey, hold up, like I have pain too, and yes, I have white skin, but I come from poor people, I come from immigrants, I come from refugees, I come from from people who have been outcast from society, or there's alcoholism in my family, or I have disabilities, I'm queer, so there's this feeling like, I guess I've been wondering if it is possible for people to truly empathize with another group's suffering in an experience where they may be benefiting from the same system that harms their friends, or the people they care about. Is it possible to feel empathy without first having their own pain acknowledged? Because is what people seem to be calling for in that space. It's like, hey, yes, I'll see this other person's pain, but you got to see mine first, or two. And I think that's valid. And I get that. And I also really appreciate you saying, what I'm hearing you say is that it's possible to do it, to find that place also through letting go of some of the shame of being in that dominant group, or coming from people who may have harmed in ways that you wouldn't have chosen. Am I getting you right?
You're getting me right, and you're adding a layer that I think is really important. I feel like, there's an understanding that the heart of Buddhism is compassion. The heart of compassion is compassion for ourselves. And so if you and I are together and I want to have compassion for the suffering that you have experienced being born in a Black body, and I'm with you right now, and right now I'm still feeling a clench because my mother was an alcoholic, because I came from a Jewish family, because I knew different types of caste systems. If I'm still feeling that in my body, I have to first acknowledge and be with and feel tenderness towards my own suffering. Always have to start there. Mm-hmm. Or else I won't be embodied and tender enough to really include yours authentically. Mm. So first I have to feel mine. I have to feel, yes, this body mind has suffered too. And I have to feel the collective holding that, others caring. And I have to not feel shame for the fact that my actions are involved with your suffering. I have to know it's not personal. It's not what I wish. Mm-hmm. It's just the karma of how these societies have unfolded. So those are the two kind of prerequisites, because my shame will block my care.
Yeah. That feels very powerful to me, because it also feels like everything doesn't have to happen all in the same moment, which I think is really a challenge when facilitating a group and starting to unpack some of this material. Is like everybody wants everything to happen at exactly the same time. You see my pain, I see your pain. We acknowledge all, and we all tell our story, and that, it not only isn't practical just in terms of how time works, but it also, it does seem like there needs to be space for each one to be seen on its own. And we have to start somewhere. And so I love the idea that there might be this, in another time and space, working with compassion towards, my own history and my own wounds, and ability to hold them in such a way that when I show up with you and you're saying, can you see the way I'm hurting, that I could potentially do that without needing to kind of co-opt that space or rip open my, my scars so you can see them too. Is that, yeah.
So what you're pointing, and you're pointing to something else that feels really important in relationships, whether it's just two of us or a group, which is we can't meet everybody's needs all at once at the same time. So right. There's sometimes we're going to have to live with feeling uncomfortable. And you have a great chapter, Endure What is Hard to Endure. And you invite us forward in a very powerful way, Kate, in this book, about making an effort. And it's a wise effort that stretches and enlarges us. And I feel like endure what is hard to endure. If we really want to build the bridges and reconnect and know the kind of depth of the truth of oneness, on the way, we have to be able to be really uncomfortable. We have to be willing. So I was wondering if maybe you could speak a little more to that, because you have some fantastic examples in the book, and it's such a powerful teaching.
Yes, I know about being uncomfortable. Oh man. I mean, I think you're right. I think Buddha was right, about this quality of endurance and the ability to stay with an experience over time. I think that's part of why it is so helpful to do, and so such an awakening experience to do this kind of practice within a relationship like friendship, because there is a kind of commitment over time, and because we do have the sense that we're going to be able to come back and address the things that we didn't get at last time, you know, and that we don't have to do everything all at once, but that we're committed to kind of this process of unfolding together. I think it's really special when it happens among two people. I think it's really special when it happens within a community. And I love, you know, what you're talking about with these, you know, containers of several years long, where you really decide to stick with each other, you know, in the messiness and in the mistakes and in the, you know, I mean, you're talking about your own process, being a part of that group and how that evolved. And I'm imagining it was happening for each of you individually and then for the group as a whole. And to say there's enough good here and there's enough possibility here that we can stay together even through the hard parts. And that's not always the case,
Yeah.
you know, and that's something that, I mean, in the process of writing the book, I think I became, for every statement that I made about friendship, I could think about some examples where that wouldn't be appropriate, you know, like, and I really want to qualify here that I think the friendship that the Buddha taught and the friendship that I hope to talk about in the book isn't the same as just, you know, being nice and, you know, keeping things cool and being, you know, smiling a lot. And, you know, that there's this other area of wise effort and I would say joyful effort that's involved. But yeah, I think part of radical friendship is both knowing when there's enough goodness to stay in a relationship through the hard times, and there's also, you know, being able to be honest when we say, actually, there's not enough here for me to engage with this other person or this group or this community, and not abandon myself in the process. Both are true and both are a part of the practice, and that's what makes it less like a set of rules and do's and don'ts and more like a practice.
It's a living practice. And I really love what I'm hearing, which is at the root of it, for me to have a radical friendship with myself, I have to have a commitment. I have to really have kind of a trust that this is the path that's going to be most liberating, and a commitment to hang in. That I have to be willing to stand behind myself. And I mean, I remember in my own life the kind of several times where it became very clear that if I wanted to keep waking up, I had to really dedicate myself to loving myself and to healing. Like it was really a feeling of commitment. I am committed to not staying in the trance of unworthiness. And that was like an act of radical friendship to myself, that level of commitment. And then the effort comes out of that. It's like, that's the effort's the energy towards what really matters. And it's the same thing with each other. For you and I to have a radical friendship, it means that we have to have that sense of really trusting the mutuality that we're both willing to hang in. And then we have the capacity to hang in. And I think then it widens to a group that you're with. How can you have radical friendship in a group? Well, you have to have the group really committed to enduring what's hard to endure. We have to be willing to be uncomfortable.
Right. I think that's right. Yeah. Yeah. I suddenly, this teaching that, Sharon Salzberg gave one time came to mind of, she talked about, it was like the practicality of metta and the kind of, we were living in New York City at the time, and she said metta is like the feeling that you would feel with a group of people. Like, say, she said she advocated for practicing metta on the subway, and she said, but it's not just that you're on the subway with these people until you get to 59th Street. She's like, you do metta as if you're on the subway with these people forever. Like, this is
that's great.
Forever. Yeah. It gives it a different flavor.
Yeah. And there are different levels of how engaged we are with people. You know, if you're married to somebody, your radical friendship, it's a very deep, deep commitment to hang in and be with what's difficult with each other. you're much more going to be spending the time on that. So I was kind of wondering if maybe you could share an example from your life where you and somebody who's different from you, a person of difference, how you cultivated a radical friendship with them, with real authentic relating, like what helped to grow it.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I really believe is that whenever we're relating with another person, we're relating across a difference of some kind, whether it's, any of the many characteristics that make up who our social selves are. So I think in some ways I could talk about any relationship.
Any relationship.
However, when I think about, I do focus on racial justice a lot in the book just to have a lens. And so there's one friend that I've been friends with for well over a decade at this point. We worked together in yoga space in New York. And I remember one time where I was talking to him and I was expressing something I didn't like. And I used this language that I wouldn't use today, but I said, oh, this is so lame and that's so lame. And, he happened to have a partner who has a disability, and I could tell something was happening with his face, but I wasn't yet at a place where I was willing to just, ask, which, by the way, I think is also a really important practice in friendship, is that often we actually know when something's not quite right, and to be able to slow down and ask rather than kind of continue to barrel forth, brush over the facial expression or the kind of moment of tension in the body. But that's what I did. And then at some point he said, what do you mean by that, Lane? And I kind of caught myself. I thought, oh, that wasn't right. And I said, oh, I mean, it just doesn't work well. It's kind of wonky and it's like, a little bit off and kind of sucks. And he's like, yeah, that word, I know my partner, it would really hurt her if she heard that word, because it's something that people have said to, people who have physical disabilities for a long time, to make them feel less than. And immediately I was just so ashamed, like, oh my God, like, how could I do this? Like, identification with the one who knows and is, woke, as you say, and oh my gosh, I did this. And I felt like he was really gracious about it. And he just said, we kind of brainstormed together, like, what are some of the other words we could say that got at that feeling, but that didn't kind of create harm. And I feel like the way that he approached me in that moment was so tender and so gentle. And even though I was the person who was, had said something harmful, that he didn't lose sight of my humanity in that moment. And part of that is that we actually had a relationship. So we had all this other context for me to draw on. And yeah, I brought a new level of awareness to the way that I speak, and, the potential to, use my speech in a way that helps and doesn't hurt. But also, like, I think that it was a real teaching around how to, like, being lovingly called in. And I know that there's more of a discourse now kind of in the culture at large around calling in and calling out. And of course now even, cancel culture seems to be co-opted by people who really shouldn't be using that word. And, like, that there's like, how we handle each other in those moments of screwing up, especially when we're working together across a difference of some kind, feels like a real example of radical friendship to me. And it also meant that in the future, because this is a white man, when we had stuff that came up around race and power, that I felt like I could share with him too, that this is how this impacted me. And so I think in that process, developed a kind of spiritual consent with one another, where we have a commitment to helping each other see what the other doesn't see. And that that feels like a powerful partnership. And it's not that we lived happily ever after. Like, we still have issues with one another. And there's, we go through periods of time where we just need space from one another because the relationship feels like it's a lot of work or something, but we find our way back to each other. I think that's actually a part of our friendship too that's important, is that we allow space.
So you're naming elements of radical friendship that I think really help us ground this conversation. The given is that we will rub each other wrong. The given is that we hurt each other, actually. And what I'm hearing you say is that's not a problem. That does not have to be a problem that we hurt each other. What makes it kind of grounds for transformation is how we then deal with it. Can we be honest and speak to each other, not from aggression, but as he did, there was a tenderness and a realness. Can you take it in and learn and grow? It's like, can we go ahead and hurt each other and rub each other wrong and find ways to respond that actually end up deepening trust? I mean, I find that in my marriage, that it's not that we lack, our edges hitting each other. It's more that each time they do, and we can navigate with honesty and kindness, we end up having more space of trust. And I also love that your relationship has room for moving in and out. It's like the wings of the bird that go up and down. It's like we're not always open-hearted. That's okay. We're not always wanting to be close. That's okay. There's enough trust to let people go in and out in an authentic friendship. In and out meaning of the level of contact.
Right. I like that you bring up the way that, radical friendship plays out in something like a marriage, and I've been thinking more and more about, if there's some kind of like formal commitment I want to start making with my friends, or some kind of ceremony to say, hey, we're, many of my radical friendships have evolved to be that way over time, but that's one thing that kind of sparked my mind. The other thing that came up for me as I was listening to you, it's I'm in a romantic partnership too, experiencing many of the same kind of dynamics of like how unintentionally hurting each other, finding a way to repair. One of the things that I was reading recently is it's from the Gottman Institute. They talk about how for every moment of hurt, there has to be, several moments of love and tenderness and care to actually make that possible. Like I think they said a 5-to-1 ratio, essentially. Like for every moment of separation, there's got to be 5 of connection to actually make that, to keep the relationship strong and healthy. And that's, if there's any, of course, when you write a book, what I hear is that everyone feels this way. There's things that they would have written now that they didn't include. And I think I did. I like the book that I wrote. I think if I wrote another one again, I would include that also, that like how important it is for us to also, celebrate our friends and, gas them up and tell them they look beautiful and, like remind them what we appreciate about them and allow our love to show up on our faces for them. And, just these gestures of appreciation and care, I think also build the foundation for being able to weather these hard parts that inevitably come.
That's a takeaway. Thank you. 5-to-1. I'm going to remember. I'm going to be talking 5-to-1 to Jonathan. So, part of this, what it makes me think about is you have, again, your teachings invite us to stretch. And I kind of think it's a cool idea. Like, hey, you want to be radical friends, and then actually having the consciousness that, oh, we're committed to stretching more. We're committed to investigating more. We're committed to nurturing more, at least 5-to-1 scale, I think that's a great idea. And one of the things you talk about is giving what's hard to give. And your kind of realizations around time. And I think I just want to hear you say some more about it, because I feel like our society is so diseased around time and around rushing and around speed and around, you know, we all have so much fear of failure and like, I have to get more done. I have to check this off the list. I'm going to miss the plane, that we don't do the 5 to 1. So can you speak a little more about time?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I put it in the chapter on giving what is hard to give, because I think what comes up immediately is, money and material resources. It's like, oh, what do I, how might I stretch myself to express generosity, even, being willing to give what's like a little bit difficult, right? Not just kind of what's comfortable, in service of supporting someone else who really needs it, or supporting liberation in some way. And then right after that, my thought was, oh my gosh, I mean, it's associated with money actually. And I think that's part of it, in a capitalist society, they're linked. But time, and in everything that we've talked about so far, time is kind of the secret ingredient. I think, we're not going to be able to pause and offer a kind word, or call each other in lovingly, or listen wholeheartedly, or speak really honestly and directly, or express any appreciation. Like, all of these things require time. And in the book, I talk about learning that as a parent. I'm a parent of a baby. I have a 7-month-old. And then I also have a bonus kid from my partner's previous relationship, who's 12 now. And yeah, that relationship with my stepdaughter is where I really got it. Because I had been living this like very fast life, in an urban setting, and really, as a single adult living on my own, was in charge of my time all the time, and I decided when I ate and how long something took. And I didn't really have to coordinate with other people very much. And to meet someone who really went at her own pace, and her pace was like the pace of wonder. It wasn't like she was being obstructionist. It was like, she's so excited about the world around her and her own body and our relationship, and that things just take longer. And yeah, I'm so grateful to her for teaching me to slow down, and teaching me that not only it's to slow down, but also that me not always being in charge of my time is a good thing, actually. That allowing someone else to lead and to go at their pace, and to hang in with them, for as long as it takes, them to move through a particular, getting ready for school or conversation, in the case of my stepdaughter, often it just makes like a life a lot more fun, but in case of other relationships, it just, I just learn so much and get to discover so much more than I would if I was just in charge all the time. Yeah. And I do think it's really heartbreaking what our culture and economic systems have done to our sense of time, and never having enough and not having enough to give. And I think that friendship is a place where we can really resist that slide into, a more mechanized way of inhabiting ourselves in the world, and to really be acknowledging that, human beings need time to be together, need time to do nothing, need time to rest, need time to linger or pause or dawdle, or and what I love about friendship is that, even more than like a romantic relationship or a parenting or other kinds of relationship that have these explicit commitments, friendship as we have it now really exists in this like totally, at least the radical friendship that I think the Buddha is talking about, this totally non-transactional space, where what we get is the relationship.
That is the win. Yeah. And that's beautifully said. Non-transactional space, that we're actually in it for just the sake of loving connectedness. And And that takes time. It's like paying attention.
Yeah.
If I can really listen to you, if I can really pay attention and put down my agenda, what fills that space is a sense of connectedness. And, you're speaking about radical friendship, and I was thinking about the suffering of our earth and how, part of the hierarchy of our societies that's so toxic is that humans feel disconnected from the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Like earth is separate, and we're above other species, so we get to dominate them. We get to consider the earth as our disposal for, getting resources and using it as a sewer. It's like it's the opposite of friendship, and that the first time I ever realized I truly wasn't alone, that I could never be alone, was in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And this sense of this living body is part of this living earth. And I started a practice out of that I've shared recently about a number of times, because I keep doing it, and it's just such a live one, which is just reflecting on we are friends, and seeing a tree and saying we are friends, or the geese that I watch a lot, and or the plants or the birds, and I'm beginning to grow up and extend it to people.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do, Kate, in the moments that, like, and I'm just sensing it right now with you, that we are friends, it immediately bursts forth into living manifested reality. And so it feels like, how are we going to save our earth if we don't feel a sense of loving friendliness with this earth, with this creation?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I know for me, it's part of why I eat plant-based, is just, it's the suffering of other living beings. It's the harm of the animal industry to the earth, but this real sense of we are friends when I bring it to the animals that get tortured. And so I'm just really sensing how what you're teaching about with radical friendship, when we make it conscious, wakes up our relatedness to all facets of this living world. And if we do it consciously, it'll actually change the way we live on this earth.
Yeah. I certainly hope so. I really do, and I love that you brought this to, like, what does it mean to have a radical friendship with the earth itself? And, how do we protect and fortify that relationship in a way that allows us to actually live? One of the things that I mentioned in the book, Janella Rose, who's part of the Sogoriate Land Trust, she said that they treat the earth like a relative, and to have a sense that this is a living being, breathing being that has given us everything. And what would it be like to give back rather than continue to take and take and take? That it feels like this establishing of a relationship of radical friendship is a first step and an essential step. And I know that there are more steps to that journey. I wish that the people who have the most power to shift some of the policies that that damage the earth or that fail to protect it could have that kind of experience, whether it's to be in nature and to realize, like, oh, this is my friend, or even to care enough about their own descendants to want them to have a space that they can, an earth that's inhabitable, where they can actually survive and breathe the air and drink the water and have enough food, and to avoid diseases, like we're seeing now. Yeah, I think it's an essential first step, and I feel like, well, I already said this, but there's more there in terms of what's needed to bring about the radical and very, we talked about time, like, and this is a case in which we actually don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I think that the element of friendship and relationship that we're not going to be able to do it without that. And I think that's something that the environmental movement missed, back in the 80s when I first started learning about, I think I told you this story before, but, I grew up in Chicago. And so, when I first learned about the environment, I was like, the Save the Rainforest was the big like environmental thing. And I told my mom one day, I was like, Mom, I really hope one day I can go to the environment. And she was like, what do you mean? And I showed her my little like Save the Rainforest book with like a toucan on the front. And I was like, here, this is where I'd like to go, But I think that, environmentalism and the environmental movement and the social justice movement were really working on separate projects for a long time. And there was, I think, this tension between people who were like, save the earth, and people were like, no, save people, And of course, now I think that movements are, increasingly understanding the complete, interrelationship between the two, and that, the people who are most, being impacted now by climate crisis are people who are marginalized by society and disempowered by society as well. So I think, how is it that we get people to get together enough to really feel that we are on the same team here, so that we can make a meaningful change in the way we relate to our planet, is a big question. I think it's the right question. I feel like, I hope that friendship can be a part of the answer there. I think it is.
Me too. I'm going to kind of ask a final wind up. First of all, as many of you just heard, Kate's got a gorgeous new babe, Maple. And I guess what I'm wondering is, you've just been momming for the last bunch of months. And, is there anything else? You mentioned one thing. Is there anything else that, if you were writing again, that you would have wished you included, that you're learning from being a new mom, or anything else that's emerged that you kind of want to add in?
Mm-hmm. I think I'm still really understanding and unpacking the experience of being, a Black mom in a Black maternal health crisis, in a pandemic, on a rapidly heating planet, in the middle of an uprising around, police brutality and anti-Black violence. That was a lot. And I feel like, for practical reasons because of the pandemic, but also just for personal reasons, like I feel like my inclination there was to kind of withdraw a bit. And I know that's, not uncommon and healthy during pregnancy, and certainly with the conditions that we had, to kind of like bring it in. Also, I was trying to finish this book. Just, one of the things that I'm really curious about now, as we see the rise of the Delta variant and look at other potential variants coming forward, and when I was writing this book, we were still under the impression that once we got a vaccine, this would all be over, and now we're learning that that's not. And so, if there was something else I want to include or explore, I guess two things from that experience. One is around like how we plan to care for each other in times of crisis and disaster, because it does seem that even if we take radical action now, we are still going to be seeing the impacts of climate crisis for quite some time, and our societal injustices don't seem to be, just going poof, even though the awareness is so much greater now. So I think that's part of it. Like how might we explore these teachings as they relate to navigating crises like the ones we are experiencing now. I think my hope is that people would take these teachings and creatively apply them to whatever situation they're working with. But I think there's even maybe something more to be articulated there. And the second thing has to do with parenting and mothering in particular. And I feel like when we look at some of the social and political crises we're experiencing now, particularly around climate, I think there's something that I would imagine parents might have in common, regardless of their party affiliation, in terms of, how do we make this country and this world a place that is um, safe and generative for children to grow up. And I would love to explore that more. Like, what does it mean to be, to teach our children about friendship, to partner with each other in solidarity as parents, and also to kind of demand from our social systems that they allow for a little bit more support for parents. Like I realize in this time of mothering, like, wow, there's no financial support for childcare. I don't have paid maternity leave. Like, there's these high societal expectations, and just really would love for there to be to help support more dialogue, both around the I guess what I'm saying is spaces where we both acknowledge the impossible task, that is ahead of, parents and mothers in this space, and work for the sustainability of parents through relationship. And then also intend that those stronger relationships help us to transform these systems that make our work impossible.
Totally resonates. It really does. And it makes sense that you'd be immersed and really sensing from the inside out the challenges, and also how the teachings you've already outlined so powerfully in the book really are the groundwork, but now we need to apply them to these times. Yeah. Kate, thank you. Thank you so much. To all who are listening, thank you for being part of this. And I hope you feel inspired to not just read the book, but to explore, well, what does it mean in your life with people people you don't know, to explore developing this very rich, juicy, spiritually awakening kind of way of relating. So yeah, I hope you'll read it. And again, Kate, it's just a pleasure to be able to do this together. So thank you, dear.
Thank you so much, Tara.